Welcome to She Blaze, where we're bringing you cannabis culture from a woman's point of view. And as always, here to elevate the cannabis industry. I'm one of your hosts, Ice Dawson, Cannabis Socialite.
She Blaze.
And I am Dasheeda Dawson, the WeedHead.
Hi, sis.
Hey, sis.
Hey, sis. On today's episode of She Blaze, Drake gets dropped from Canadian MSO, Louisiana lawmakers say yes to smokable flower, and Nevada enacts some major cannabis reform.
Well, of course, it's going to be a very busy day, and folks are like, y'all are together. Yes. And let's kick things off with the high of the week. Okay, so my high of the week is actually what I get to do today, which is celebrating pride and equity. I'm, at the intersection of being a Black bisexual woman and fighting for equity every day in the cannabis space. So shout out to Tokeativity for their event that starts today at 2 p.m. PST. I hit the main stage at 3:25 PST. You can click the link, tokeativity.com/connect to learn more. But that is what I'm high on today.
Yes.
It is Pride Month.
It is Pride Month, and in this family, we wear our rainbows out, honey. And so I'm really excited for you to do that. And I'm excited because we are together. And my high of the week is because I am in a beautiful city with my sister, okay? And this is going to help me go back to the East Coast. And it is the Nekktar BuzzBoxx, okay? It is a cannabis accessory holder. It can store your vape, your one hitter, some flour. It's smell proof, waterproof, and it has a magnetic closing. I'm actually super excited because I will be giving a full review of this on the WeedHead.com. Oh, and I forgot to say, it is Black owned, y'all.
Okay.
And under $50, we could use that, honey. So definitely check them out. They got some major things happening on Nekktar.
Nekktar.com, right?
Yes,
okay.
Nekktar.com. I also got the IG there for you guys, too, because you could just follow IG. IG got a whole shop page and everything, child.
Well, thank you so much for pointing this out. And I'm definitely wanting folks to know that the Nekktar has 2 Ks, Nekktar. I wouldn't have spelled that right if I was just listening. So that's why I shouted that out. But as always, you always find us our very, very, very interesting hot topics of the week. What do you have in store for us this week?
Ooh, it is so juicy. And we're starting off hot topic number 1 with the juiciest of them all, Drake, you guys. So I don't know if you guys know this, but we did not report about it on She Blaze, so we don't know if you know this truly. In November of 2019, music mogul rapper Drake went into business with Canadian MSO Canopy Growth. Yes. And with this, they created a company called More Life Growth Company. And this was a venture to do adult use cannabis and accessories in Canada. Now, they would have really cashed out on Drake, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And so back in 2019, it was reported with their agreement, Drake would own 60% of More Life Growth, while Canopy Growth will be able to own the rest. And they'll have some nominees on the board for the business. Sounding real official and business-like, right, you guys? Okay. Well, basically, they were able to use each other and exploit each other's brand to get business. And they actually gave the More Life brand ownership of one of their Ontario-based cannabis production facilities.
Yes. Okay.
So how do you think were you excited when you heard the news? Did you hear about it?
No, and I don't, I'm not all that excited when we hear celebrities getting in. They can get in. It's just, what are you doing once you're in? And, I wasn't necessarily anticipating some major equity moves here. So what did happen, though? It doesn't sound that good.
Well, in 2020, during this COVID thing, the new CEO, because this was a different CEO that signed with the More Life Grow, the new CEO of Canopy Grow basically just let everybody know the agreement was not working out how it intended. It actually had not produced any cannabis products or accessories, merchandise too. They were really looking to cash out on some More Life merchandise. That did not happen. And that, basically More Life is on the bottom of the things that they really wanted to do for cannabis in Canopy growth. And Canopy Growth is known for working with celebrities like Snoop Dogg, Martha Stewart, Seth Rogen. So they were really trying to get people in cannabis through the celebrity.
Well, I mean, they need to. There, you know, for people that don't know what Canopy Growth is, they're a large multi-state operator, one of the largest in the world, and so I would say they're international in their operations, and they've been doing a lot of acquisition. But to your point, in certain countries like Canada, they can't really use celebrities the way that you can use them in the United States. Canada actually has some laws that prevent cannabis companies from doing that type of endorsement. In fact, you're not allowed to talk about cannabis in any way, shape, or form that's good or encouraging. It's very dry, literally. Even though they have these partnerships, they mean more in the United States and they mean more globally. And so Drake getting dropped, hopefully this means he will now seek out Black and brown operators in the space and figure out how we can cooperatively build economics together. That's what this industry should be about. There's still a lot of people in Canada that feel equity hasn't really been delivered there. It's a government-run industry, and United States is setting up to be way more capitalistic, and so therefore it will overshoot where Canada is for sales. And Drake is influential, even though I'm not a big Drake fan like that. From a popular culture standpoint, he does have influence. I think it's just, again, how are you using it? And no disrespect to Canopy Growth. Maybe, again, it was something. Hopefully they're rethinking contracts so that they can use people a little bit better and more strategic towards their equity centric focus, because Canopy Growth is part of USCC. They are definitely focused on building an equitable industry per the website. So it's important for us to just hold them accountable.
Well, we will see, because to your point, they are trying to stay within regulation. They also have that IP. Well, after this agreement was meant to last 18 months, you guys. Well, according to their filing, it did not last past March 30th of 2021. So they were 3 months early to end their agreement. And they're just saying, to your point, trying to stay in regulation, but they also could not afford the agreement with the More Life Growth. So instead of continuing it, they wanted to remove the money from it. They basically would have had to pay out $33.7 million to More Life Growth. And they wanted to use the money for something else. And that's why they scrapped the deal.
Well, I think it's looking at their bottom line, the P&L, and if it doesn't make dollars, it doesn't make sense, especially for companies as big as Canopy Growth. And I know people are like, well, they didn't have enough money for the contract. I'm sure that's the first thing you thought. You're like, that's the real tea. They couldn't afford it. And it's because of a lot of different things. One, they are really, really using a lot of cash as they deal in their acquisitions and their mergers. And two, everybody is gearing up for New York to legalize. That's a lot of cash that's being moved there. It's just one of those things where it doesn't surprise me, but this is probably a fiscally responsible thing to do.
Yes, they are. Most MSOs, people don't know whether they're Canadian or American based, and they're all very much embedded and intertwined with each other, are not operating in the green that much because of all the regulations they have to do from country to country and state to state. So that minimum right there, being an MSO, balancing that P&L and all the other companies that are rolled up under it, good luck, Chuck. But they did happen to keep on Martha Stewart and her brand. There's no word on Seth Rogen, who Martha Stewart and Seth Rogen were the only people who have had traction in their cannabis products and brand. It did not really do that much with Snoop Dogg.
Gotcha.
So, More Life, Drake, if you're looking for people of color that can produce your products and keep it to the culture, holla at us. We know some people.
Hilarious, but factual. Well, listen, Drake has an opportunity to do it better, and Canopy Growth does as well. So figure out what's going to be fiscally responsible but still equitable, and I'm here for it, and I will definitely be looking to see what that transpires to be.
Heck yeah. And we have not had any word on what's happening with More Life growth in America. This is just Canadian based, you guys. Just to throw that out there as we stay on track of that tea and canopy growth. And if you guys got their little stocks, you want to keep track of that too.
Yes.
But moving right along to hot topic number 2, because we are all about cannabis, civil rights, BIPOC, women-owned, LGBTQA, okay? And so we're very much so about that. And we talked about the MORE Act last week because we know it's been more and more cannabis bills on this House floor.
Right.
Well, people are feeling like we're right. We need to go ahead and pass the MORE Act, even though they're saying it's the same one from, last year that most of the advocates was scratching their heads about. That there are people out there that are not cannabis connected telling lawmakers to go ahead and pass that MORE Act.
Okay, I'm like, where do I get started? I'm so annoyed by this, but at the same time, encouraged. So I know you want to tell the deeds, so let's just kick the ballistics for folks real quick. But I have a very strong opinion, and it is one that's a little viscerally negative initially.
Okay, well, this is a coalition of civil rights advocacy groups. Okay, so just put it there, civil rights is the general term, and this is called the Leadership Conference on Civil Rights and Civil and Human Rights. There are over 222 national organizations joined to this conference, okay, you guys? And honey, they sent a letter to the House leadership calling to properly pass the MORE Act and made sure that they wanted to, help expunge records, decriminalize, use it to really get the ball rolling federally with cannabis legalization. Well, that's not the real tea. The real tea, y'all, is that the former leader of this coalition, okay, is now Joe Biden Assistant Attorney General, who we all know went back and on the Senate floor when she was getting in and asking all the questions by senators, went back and actually backpedaled on her stance on cannabis, criminalization and decriminalize. She basically let them know, yes, there is racial bias with cannabis and marijuana and law enforcement, but she did say that she does not think it should be descheduled or decriminalized, and that was not her job to do as the Assistant Attorney General. Sum it up.
Well, I mean, that's one side of the tea. I gotta back all the way up for folks because I think, being in this industry, they're just too, people have a short memory. I'm happy to hear folks like NAACP is helping to be behind a bill like the MORE Act, except they don't have enough cannabis competency and they are new to the game. Let's be honest. And so let's know what we are actually trying to support. The MORE Act is not perfect. And if we're going to have all of these civil rights coalitions get behind something, it's better that you know the value of the farm before you're trying to sell it. And in this case, I feel like these are the same organizations that we struggled with when we first got into the industry with sharing the message around cannabis and the importance of cannabis. I've been saying cannabis is a civil rights issue for years at this point, and people for many, many, many more years before then. And the NAACP in particular, or NAACP in particular, having been the first at their national conference to really, exhibit and to speak, it was clear that, there's a very shallow perspective on what cannabis can actually be used for on the social justice end. It was also clear there was a lot of fear, and rightfully so. This is something that has been used to really criminalize our communities in a way that we are seeing in every aspect of our lives, even the COVID-19 outcomes that have it's harmed us. But we still have a lot of leaders who have not really come to grips with what cannabis criminalization has done, but also that cannabis is medicine. So we don't want anybody just coming to the table pushing a bill because you're like interested in the expungement part of the bill. The MORE Act stands for opportunity, marijuana opportunity, reinvestment, and expungement. And so that opportunity piece is real key. And I think that our leaders need to know what that really means. So that means coming together with the Marijuana Justice Coalition that also has called for the MORE Act to be passed. I still think these are real superficial, like we needed to pass. And I think because we had the historic vote last year, we feel like we got to do it. But that vote was still a little bit of performative stuff because it had things in the bill that advocates that have been doing this for years did not support. So let's just make sure this bill is top notch, right? We still also don't know what Schumer, Booker, and Wyden is going to produce in the Senate. And so maybe that call, instead of trying to say pass the House, call for that bill to be at least that good or better. You know, we can use our voice in different ways is what I'm kind of trying to get at. And I guess I don't want the people who will get the pulpit by virtue of the fact that they're part of a larger organization like an NAACP, but they don't have a clue about what's really been happening in the cannabis advocacy and equity space.
Sis, they had you on a panel with somebody who really didn't even know the definition of cannabis. He was just calling it weed. Okay. He couldn't even tell you anything about no terpene, no nothing.
Right. Well, you know, and there's a lot of people in the culture that have that. I'm not trying to say.
No. But these are not the thought leaders that we want to put in place of policy. These are the thought leaders that we want to put in place of product,
right? Culture.
You know, being a connoisseur. I'm a cannabis connoisseur, so I obviously understand and I don't mind that. But you can't go on stage talking about weed and cannabis and not know MF and terpene.
Yes, that's true, especially on stage at a NAACP national conference. And let's be honest, the whole conversation was pushed into the back of the programming. We had some people join us, but it was very confusing. I was on a panel with someone who was also a warden in New Jersey and the New Jersey president for NAACP. So it's been just a mix of a mess. That's only one, like you said, there's over 200 organizations. ACLU is another title organization that's supporting this. ACLU has produced a number of papers papers, data synthesized that we're using in legislation today. So their Tale of Two Worlds or Two Countries 2020 that just got published, it really does break down just how biased all of the enforcement has been, how racially biased it has been across the country, state by state. So to have that is invaluable. So shout out to them for that. But I also think that there's still, again, a limited direction that this goes because it still hasn't been what the current status is on cannabis equity and opportunity. And it's about respecting the legacy market, which I don't feel like these organizations do fully. They're just starting to gain that respect, but they've dissed it and they've distanced themselves from it and they've made it about respectability politics. And this is not about respectability politics. That all needs to be deaded and crashed and burned and, pushed aside, period, because it hasn't helped Black and brown folks in this country. But in cannabis, especially because everything we are respectable about was a lie. And is it true? So you got to clear your palate from it.
Yes. And a lot of these organizations, we do appreciate them, but they are backed by funding. This is the first time, I don't know if you know this is the first time the NAACP has directly, in their coalition, spoke out about cannabis and the being in favor of cannabis. Because even though they had us exhibit and they had us on the panel, not once when I went into this very long meeting about all the things that they should be focused on them, did they say that they wanted to support cannabis. Right. And every year since, this is the first year. And what we do have to make sure we recognize is that they get a lot of funding from a lot of different places, okay? Mm-hmm. And not all money is good money, but we appreciate it. And so now that certain members that's currently funding the NAACP are now behind cannabis publicly, I feel like they're switching the words a little bit now.
Oh, yes. It's a total flex. It is a flip-flop. It is a flex. And you know what? We got to decide how we're going to use it because it's chess, not checkers. And so we cannot cast aside still the largest organization that's supporting people of color, specifically Black people in this country. But to your point, the NAACP conferences was mostly 65 and older, and the forced 15 to 21-year-olds that had to go as part of the program they were doing. there's got to be a gap, like that gap closer. How do you get back in touch with people my age, your age? Right now, they are literally, in my opinion, devoid of the zillennials and the millennials and the exennials, that group of us from the late 70s to the early 2000s. It isn't hitting. And it isn't hitting because we still have a lot of respectability politics. These are the people talking about the bonnet in the fucking public. Excuse my language, but that's the reality, right?
Not and the bonnet. You still mad about that?
I am. You lucky I didn't have a bonnet on today. Okay,
again, right?
It's like, listen, that we didn't fight all this. People talk about, oh well, now you fought to have your hair natural out, and now you want to cover it. No, boo. I fought to just be, and if I want to be with a bonnet on today, then that's what's going to happen today. It isn't about my hair being natural specifically and wanting to show it. It's just being able to be. They did that with our nails, and now like my colorful nails is something that is welcomed in the corporate setting, but to be told that as a teenager that you'll never be taken seriously because you like big hair that seems a little odd, that came and was perpetuated through channels like the NAACP. It's why I never participate in those things. No, I'm not gonna press my hair to come to your meeting. No. And honestly, as a woman of Alpha Kappa Alpha, thankfully I was part of a chapter that was a very progressive chapter. Shout out to Omicron Nu, the one and only Omicron Nu. But the fact of the matter is that progression is what allowed me to say, hey, I can do that. But this is where we're stuck. And right now, my worry is that they want us to support the MORE Act, but they haven't, again, proven that they really understand what all the implications are. And it's still being very one note. We want to get people out of jail. Yes, but look at what's happening on the other side, because while we're talking and looking at the jail thing and they're giving that to us, they are scooting away with the real money on the opportunity and the reinvestment. So,
and they putting in laws that won't allow you, after you expunge your record and get your life back, they like, oh, by the way, you went to jail for it, so you can't even participate in this industry anymore outside of consuming.
Yeah, no, that's not what we're doing. We did that in 2020. I mean, we ain't been doing that since I've been in the industry for real. We are advocating out loud about what needs to happen. And so I applaud the Civil Rights Coalition coming together, but y'all can't demand nothing. Y'all might want to demand a meeting with all of the cannabis leaders that have been doing the work. Demand that. Cannabis Regulators of Color Coalition, I'll put that out there. CRCC will meet with this coalition whenever, because I think we all got to be saying the same thing. We got to, actually be on the same page. And that means having the music, the sheet music. And right now, I don't think they have it.
Yes. And they tend to only meet with one type of cannabis coalition. I think it's like, to your point, CRCC is doing some big things. And, I think that there needs to be multiple coalitions that you're meeting with to understand and get cannabis competency, because the education level with cannabis, Lord, to these policymakers, it makes me nervous.
It should be. It should make you nervous. It should.
And we might need to keep being nervous, you guys, because we got to go into hot topic number 3, because we could go on forever about cannabis equity and passing. But we got to be nervous because Louisiana lawmakers are saying expand our medical marijuana child and give us some smokable flower.
Wow. Well, first of all, round of applause for Louisiana finally making it so that their market can do something, because they don't got a lot of patience. It's like Louisiana number of patients is like a little backyard get together compared to some of, I'm being honest, it's like a little cipher.
It's like around 5,000.
Exactly. It's like a little cipher compared to some of these markets across the country. I mean, it is not to joke, but it's just the reality of the situation.
Yes, it's so the reality, but it is also, for me, like, I've been putting a lot of light on Mississippi. So Louisiana doing this is like, okay, are we pushing the South in the right direction? And it may be true. So according to Marijuana Moment and AP News, the medical marijuana expansion with smokable flower did wonderful in the House and the Senate as far as the votes yes to pass. And it's already been signaled by the governor that he will sign this bill.
Okay.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So we're super excited about that, but we might have to be a little bit nervous because they're now adding raw smokable flower. Okay. However, there are only very limited cultivations for cannabis. They only have it through their state universities, and there's only a few, like less than 10 cannabis dispensaries in Louisiana. So if their patient population were to grow, how would they be able to keep up with demand?
Good question. Well, one, Louisiana's medical cannabis market does not have equity, right? It has as close to a state run, similar to Canada being a country run or government run industry, is as close as it's going to get, meaning the licenses are only through like you said, State University, Southern University, Law Center. Law Center is one that we partner with, but Southern University as a whole system is one of those licenses. So it's definitely important for us to recognize that they have a limited market anyway. Now, as a product manufacturer, you can then go ahead and get a further license to be able to take your, thing from flower into the allowable formats, which are mostly been tinctures and topicals and the like. Inhalers.
Edible gummies.
Right. But it has not been the pure flower. I think more people will get into the market, but it's still, if there's no expansion of the licenses, no expansion of who gets to cultivate, it's still going to be a not so great market. I think this is being done because, yes, flower is the cheapest, and there's a lot of medical patients of those 5,000 that's like, yo, this is super expensive. That's why I'm not doing it. I would like the flower so I can transform it into whatever I want, right. Instead of paying that upcharge every time more manufacturing gets done. But I also just think that they see it as more money, right? More state tax revenue, and not caring whether or not there's opportunity for more people or reinvestment. I don't think it's the entire system. I believe the regulator there is actually a woman of color, the director of the program, and our goal is to give support to these type of regulators that might be in there fighting a good fight by themselves. Louisiana is a state that arrests more people for anything than any other state, right? They are a high.
They like don't breathe.
Yeah, they're a high arrest rate, and of course Black and brown folks represent such a large percentage of it, and so we still aren't going to see necessarily Black and brown folks want to be part of this medical program because there's still a lot of risk, right? At the end of the day, though, I still have to encourage, now that flower is going to be available, even if it's the wackest flower, unless they really can tell where your flower has come from, this is the best way to protect yourself, I think, if you are still participating in a legacy market in Louisiana. Will this change the legacy market in Louisiana? Probably not. It isn't going to make people be like, oh, I got to go get my card. No, not if I'm only buying from 4 different cultivators and it's the same stuff everywhere I go. It's like, no.
I'm like, I can make it better at home.
Well, it wasn't like they added homegrown to this.
No, they did not. And there have been there were a few medical marijuana expansion bills on the floor of their House and Senate, but this is the only one that really went somewhere. So it's a great thing, but it is kind of unfortunate that they have to do these one-off expansions, and there's not a way to put them all together so they all can pass. So I am feeling, I'm like a little nervous for these for the colleges. I'm like, are y'all going to be able to maintain patient population and go to school and provide this for this? Because a lot of their state schools are heavy into the community. So how would they be able to even balance that act of being able to provide for very large, like let's say their patient population jumps up with smokable flower? How will they be able to balance it? Because remember last year they expanded it to now any physicians can now recommend cannabis to patients.
Well, you're calling out what we know is going to happen. It's going to be a shortage. Of course, there's going to be places of drought, of course, but the legacy market still exists. And so all you're showing is all the ways that the legacy market will continue to be used. If the government wants to have a better outcome, they need to open up the licenses, expand the medical program, infuse equity into it. I was just doing an interview for Bloomberg, and we were talking about this, the fact that medical programs have been open without equity across the country. This is common. New York is the first state, and New Jersey probably, with the way CRC is going, that will expand their medical program and it will have an equity component in it. Even Illinois didn't do this. They did it with adult use, and they had, of course, what is a bit of their mess with their equity situation now. But it's almost like equity is got to be wrapped up in the pill wrapped up in the thing of adult use, right? Meaning the potential of all of this money is the only way we can talk about having real equity in the market. Everybody assumes that the medical market is just, the smallest and not as important. They also make it competitive. It shouldn't be. It's integrated, and it's actually about pie expansion. I will say this for the last time, but anybody you have heard me say this before, go back, because we have episodes about talking about the CVS model and how Advil and ibuprofen is the model. We ain't seeing no slip up on no pharmaceutical sales on like just farm grade ibuprofen. People still get prescriptions, but you also have Advil in your closet. It exists. It coexists. And I think it's not pitted against each other in this crazy way that we have in the cannabis space.
Well, I love the way you say it, and we might have to do a whole episode on the Advil model. I don't know. We might have to bring on some of the Doc Knocks for that one, because I'm gonna just have to ask questions, boo. Because I just buy my ibuprofen from Target. I don't really got much to add. But I know I'm so ratchet. But the expansion will set in place in January if it were to be signed by the governor soon. So you guys look out. I am so curious. I'm like, I don't know if I'm visiting Louisiana. I'm definitely not coming for the cannabis, but I am thankful that they're trying to figure out something, because the South needs it.
The South needs real medical cannabis, and this would be the first. Now, what would suck is if they allow flower and then they're like, but there's some THC limits to it. I also know that because we work with Southern University Law Center, that they have not put out a formal position on this yet, because they want to dig into the actual bill, because we get the headlines about the smokable formats, but what exactly does that mean, and how will that translate for folks who are attempting to buy or participate and then buy?
Right. And I like the way you say that, because lawmakers have a tendency to pass these bills and not be transparent about the amendments. They'll give you the original text that was filed, but when you go through committees and different houses and senates, all types of amendments and suggestions come, and you never know until the governor signed it. He was like, wait, I thought we removed that thing there. Yes. And it's like, nope, it's snuck back in on page 150, and we just thought you wasn't gonna read it.
Yes, we hoped you didn't read it. Not we thought you wasn't, we hoped. This is why you be with a pinky and a fine tooth comb, like, no, we got to read it. And that's also why you need to be involved from early, because it happens fast. I know that it's happened in Connecticut, and we could talk about that in a future episode, but it happens everywhere that things sneak back in. Or it's even the reason that Biden has some things on the record, so does VP Kamala Harris, that they are on the record for supporting that they never would have, because it was after the fact that those type of amendments came in. And it's unfortunate, but that's the way our government works.
Yes, because all the new administration, they backtracked so quick. I was like, got whiplash. I was like, damn, I thought you was cool with the decrypt. Oh no, okay. Well, we're not gonna put people that's gonna help us copy.
Oh no, yeah, I think he's losing the cannabis industry for sure as support. Sorry.
Child. Well, with that, we have to just end it there, because we don't have the official filings text, and we'll let you know what the positions coming out of Louisiana and their advocacy groups and their, equity movement, what their position. We'll follow up on that, because I'm curious to hear that too. I love tea, y'all. And the tea is real hot about this main topic. So let's get into it. Because Nevada is doing some tangs. They lawmakers and their governor. So I must just stop and do a golf clap for Nevada, because they did a bunch of cannabis reform things, but they did some reform just throughout their whole government. They took the time off with COVID, and they went through their government with a fine-tooth comb, child.
Lord knows they needed it, because there was some corruption. I mean, we was in Nevada reporting every week on something crazy in the cannabis space. So talk about using this time and really growing from it. And I'm excited because the advocates on the ground that we worked with, that we partnered with, it just feels good when you actually see folks winning that deserve to win.
Yes. And Nevada just hopefully gives us more hope. But so let's start off with the big headliner bills, because there's some secret cannabis bills that people didn't know passed too. We're going to really just take it through it, you guys. So let's start off with the cannabis DUI reform. Now, let's be clear. Before the governor signed this DUI reform, their cannabis safety laws were that it is illegal to operate a motor vehicle with low levels of THC metabolized in one's blood or urine, and it basically would just create you being impaired, and you will automatically get a DUI charge for your blood or urine. Well, according to the science, I thought that cannabis stay in your blood or urine for 30 days. And if you're a consumer, you're going to always have high levels of THC if you are a regular consumer, right?
High is not even the right word. Levels higher than what we test for, which are really, 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 really small levels, actually. And so in some ways, all of our drug testing that happens in this country is biased towards finding the Delta 9 THC. It's not testing CBD, it's testing specifically that one molecule in that isomer. And sometimes a Delta 8 THC can be mistaken for a Delta 9, but it's specifically testing for Delta 9 THC levels.
Right. They did not release a memo like New York did and was like, stop pulling people over for cannabis. However, they are not going to give you a DUI if you were to get tested during a stop and whatever they do with the police when you get a ticket and they think you're impaired, because I have no clue. And thank you, guy, right? But they just can't give you a DUI for having cannabis in your system, because some people do get tested and their car may smell like it, and then they're like, oh, well, come to the station and come take this drop, and now you have a DUI for cannabis, and you're like, well, I maybe haven't consumed all day or haven't consumed at all. My car just smells like it, or I smell like it.
Well, that's factual. Like, you might not have consumed for multiple weeks and your car still smell of terpenes. It is a couple of different things compounded on each other, but that we got to understand with DUI. First of all, as a police officer, and I thank God that I have a team where I have former law enforcement and they're reasonable and sensible. But as a police officer, you're trained on just looking at people who are under the influence, period. It isn't about under the influence specifically for cannabis or for alcohol or for ecstasy or whatever it is. It's just period. And being able to use your visual cues other than race, right? It's just what other people are doing.
Child, using your visual, too progressive over here.
Using visual cues to be able to identify when someone may need it. And they do things like touch your nose, the step-by-step. I mean, these are the things that, it's unfair if someone passes that and then they also get a positive THC test. Well, they could have had weeks prior, and that's why they're able to pass it. They could also be a regular heavy user, and that means that even if they only use at night, and this is during the day when it's like it's out of your system in terms of intoxication, and it's now just chilling as a metabolite. Well, guess what? That's what the body is doing, so it can get all the other good stuff out of the THC. It isn't just about being high. So we also have to expand what we understand understand under the influence to be. By all intents and purposes, but this is also why I don't drive that much anymore, because I ain't trying to get caught out there, but I'm technically always under the influence of cannabinoids, period. That is the intention behind my regimen. And anybody who has severe autoimmune issues, whether you are Montel Williams, who is, literally severe MS, that he has high cannabinoids all day, but still could deliver
speech, honey,
with some tears, with some everything. He is still delivering. It's like we need to just stop the antics that you can't be you're fully impaired just because you have consumed in some way. But that's like at least 10 years down the road. That's science needed, and that's why I fight the way I fight. But in the moment, if you are understanding how this gets metabolized, the way our tests are, they are not doing anything but being biased against it. Somebody could have literally done a few lines of coke, and because of the way coke goes out of your system, by the time it gets tested, it may not even be there, and that might be what they were under the influence of. So it's just one of those things where I just want to make sure people understand that globally we want our police officers to be able to tell if people are under the influence. That is in our best interest for sure, but we don't want to continue to make this unnecessary bias towards people who are cannabis users. One, because if we got a legacy market also as big as New York is, and Nevada has a legacy market too, people are already responsibly consuming, right? That's just what it is. It's like, you don't get this supply and demand out of nowhere, and it's not like people are like, oh, it's legal now, so now I'll be responsible.
Like, what? First of all, we need to tell them, stop trying to waste some cannabis dollars on creating a roadside testing, child, because it ain't working. Create one for coke then. No, just
no, there's a whole bunch of other ones that we really should focus. I would like us to be safe, of course, but I also want us to not negate what we know to be true, which is we have millions of users moving around, responsibly consuming in the same way we responsibly consume alcohol. Legalizing doesn't increase that. In fact, it should only make it better than what it has already been.
Right. You probably would see less impaired driving if you can trace your cannabis back to some sort of seed.
That too. I mean, yeah. I mean, the fact is you could actually get better genetics so that you aren't impaired and you're getting other opportunities to, heal your body. Cannabinoids are amazing molecules. So are terpenes, but we won't know that, and we won't really know how it works in our body fully without being able to study it. And so then there's that.
Oh, and you're not studying impairment tests, thyroid tests. It's studying how it affects your body and helps the body. Okay, let's be clear about the study.
Yeah,
because some people are a little confused. Lawmakers like, well, how are we going to figure out a cannabis breathalyzer? It's like, maybe we shouldn't be figuring that out.
Yeah, they want to figure that out before they figure out how we're going to get people out of jail. That bothers me. It's like, how are we going to figure out how to get more people in jail for being under a DUI? No, none of that. We want to stop all of it. And it's so much injury to very specific communities too. So yeah, not today, honey. Shout out to Nevada for finally getting some DUI reform. I still think Nevada is the place, certainly in Las Vegas, where people are Ubering and Lyfting everywhere anyway, even though it's super expensive. I mean,
when we went out there, David and I just thought, 65% of the drivers on the road probably had a little drinks, but that's just us.
They should be more concerned about that then. I shouldn't even laugh, because the fact is there are head-on collisions that happen every day because of alcohol related under the influence.
Not THC only. Okay, if they only had THC, I'm pretty sure they driving under the speed limit.
That's probably true.
Factual. Okay. So let's get that goes into play on October 1st, 2021, you guys. The governor has signed this cannabis reform bill, and it has happened. It is law. And I'm excited to see what other reform comes out of it, too, as far as motor vehicle operation and THC.
Okay, well, we will check one off, because that is something that we could actually do a better job in the city of Portland, state of Oregon, around some of this stuff too. So
okay, well, we all learning from each other because we kind of united, and how we're really united as sisters under this topic is really close to us, because we have a lot of Black young men coming of age in this country, and with cannabis entrepreneur queens like us, this is important. So cannabis underage possession, has been Transformed. Yes. Yes. So basically, what it does is it revises the first time penalty imposed upon minors who possess small quantities of cannabis to reduce it to basically a fine or community service.
Well, hallelujah on some things. And shout out to Miss Aisha Goins, Canna coach, Coach Canna. This is something that, like you said, hits home for us because we are a generation of women that gave birth to the next generation of men in our family. And for the eldest of these boys that are now young men, we're talking about 17, 18, 19. We're talking about the exact age that this happens. And my biggest concern always has never been, especially on my son, is that if he's going to be consuming or not. I think they all, it's been 5 years we're in the industry. Like
they'll talk to us.
They know, right? Let me go talk to Auntie Dina about this particular thing. But I definitely feel like my son could easily be in a car and it be my stuff in my little bag or wherever I have it, and he's in trouble. Right? Why does he go to jail? Why is it underage going to jail? Why does it need to be criminalized? Why also, they've have some things in this bill that is like, oh, you get counseling and all these things. Let's make sure you get counseling from somebody who actually knows cannabis. Let's not send them to a counselor that's going to be like, say no to drugs, Nancy Reagan is still your positioning. That's the other thing I would say. So that's the next step, but this is the first. Stop sending police for our teenagers and our kids for things that is now able to be sold and make the state millions and even billions of dollars. Right. Like, we can't do that. New Jersey tried to do it as well, and we were like, the governor was doing some last minute negotiation. And here's the sad part: who was they negotiating with? Folks like the NAACP, who is again like, oh, this is supposed to protect our youth, keeping punitive criminal damages for possession. No, all this doing is continuing the education pipeline being disrupted for the prison pipeline, and it's starting with cannabis. Why? When your state is now legal. Right. Not at all.
And there are levels to it. So, the first couple possessions are, to your point, community service, writing a letter. But if you keep getting small fines, they are going to send you to jail too. So there is still that, you guys. Like, it's not all the way there, but there is some way there.
And we, and I acknowledge that too. I think that we have to take the baby steps. So it's like, oh, you're still getting the damage of if I do this too many times, rather than encouraging, the underage to participate in what is still a medical market in Nevada. Like, really, especially Black and brown moms, Black, Indigenous, Latinx moms in Nevada, get your kids a medical card to protect them from that part of the law. Because even if you cannot stop them, especially after 18.
Right. They may not have a gun, but they can have a machete.
You are hilarious, but I definitely know that after 18 they got credit. That might as well be a machete. They could go into the military. There's all these things. You can get cigarettes. Like, I would much rather my son go and buy cannabis than anybody's cigarettes any day at 18.
Okay. And what's really great though about this is when they are done with whatever their fine or community service is, they will automatically seal the record for them and just keep it closed. It will not be able to be unlocked.
Well, sealing is still suspect because we know that.
Well, what's the difference from sealing and expunging?
Well, expungement is, first of all, the data never goes away. Real talk, real talk. And that's something we've been working out in our federal work group on what national expungement should look like, and et cetera, et cetera. It is about where does this data go? Who actually can access it? And so some of the things that we've been trying to do is make it so that it's really only accessible by the person. It's my proof that y'all did what you were supposed to do, which is eliminated. And it may be something that can be accessible if you're trying to get equity designation to show that, hey, listen, y'all criminalized me, and here's where my charges were. They are expunged, but that gives me eligibility. And that should just be like computer to computer talking. But we have things like in Maryland, which is now I think banned, but there used to be where it's like public access to your background in that way, and that should never be the case. Sealing in some way is really just that. It's like an envelope being sealed. It could still be open, and it has a lot more people that have access to opening it. A little bit more legal maneuvers with the right amount of money, it can still be accessed and used against you. In a lot of cases, that's the police bureau still accessing it. being able to put together strategy. I mean, literally, there was a whole police bureau called out because they were accessing, information that they had right to access, but using it in a way that they were not technically allowed to use it, making gang profiles and the like based on some of these criminal activities that were technically sealed. So it's just, we don't have enough trust in the system, and rightfully so. And so all I'm saying is the sealing is great, but the real way that we protect our kids and our teenagers, and in some ways, especially the ones who are in group homes and they're making that transition as a ward of the state, then they should be having access to the medical program. And odds are, if you going into adulthood as a ward of the state, guess what? You got PTSD, trust, especially if you're a ward of color, and you probably need to be talking with a doctor on how to use cannabis to help support how you might have some things to work through. So I don't know. I feel very strongly about it. I'm always fearful again that my work will impact my son in a negative way rather than the positive way I hope to impact it. The same way I like seeing young girls rocking their natural hair from the work that I've done. I would love a world where my nephews and my son can freely explore cannabis however they're going to do it. Because if they, go and get some as a hustling aspect, I want them to be able to have an entry point legally. Because at 18, you can work in cannabis too. You might be the best plug in the game. If you could go to the military, I'm sorry, you should be able to deal with cannabis. This whole story about I don't believe in that necessarily for a lot of reasons, both personal as well as political.
Well, they better start keeping on these studies, because I feel like they are making laws like this and don't even know the science behind it. But we do know this one actually takes effect of law a lot sooner than the other ones. This comes into law July 1st of 2021, and the governor has signed this bill.
Okay.
So the hot one that everyone and their mama is talking about, y'all, is the cannabis consumption lounges.
Hey, if we had a soundtrack, I'd be like, getting some, throw it off some fireworks, because
but I don't know if we need fireworks yet. So let's get into why.
Dang. Okay.
So this will allow regulation for on-site consumption for 21 and older. Regulators still have to determine the types of cannabis products that are appropriate for consumption in facilities. Since the cannabis is federally illegal, this is not going to be able to be around the gaming license. So, just because you smoking a pole in that casino does not mean you can smoke your doobie in there either, people. So,
so no casinos. Gotcha.
Yes. Even though you could die, from the cigarette smoke in that thing as a secondhand smoke.
Yes.
And they will create two different types of license. Okay. So the first license is the retail cannabis consumption lounges license. So if you have a retail store, you will be able to add a consumption license on top of that. And then there is another one that is called the Independent Cannabis Consumption Lounge license, which is adjacent from any retail cultivation cannabis license currently. So do you want me to get into more of the weeds of those licenses?
In a second. I think one thing we should just break down is that it isn't uncommon to see these consumption lounges as part of an add-on to a retail. While New York will have independent licensing for consumption lounges, there will also be New Jersey right across the bridge or the tunnel that will basically be only for retail. There's no other independent consumption lounge. So you're seeing that be an issue of concern for sure, because why do I have to own a whole retail shop for me to have a place for folks to sit down and participate however they're going to consume? Nobody is saying that in order for you to have a restaurant, you have to have a retail front too. In order for you to have a smoke lounge, even, you have to have a retail front too. I think they understand that these independent consumption lounges, people are going to want to buy there, but there's also a strong desire. I know I'm one of those people, I'm real particular about what it is I consume. I'm okay with BYOC too, right? I'm okay with bring your own cannabis, right? Especially if y'all going to keep it in a way like maybe they got their own little fridges or little, temperature controlled things that I can keep my weed somewhere. And when I come back, I just slide my little membership card over. They hand me over my little container. Like, in my mind, this is what Las Vegas really has the ability to do. People who are not just visiting, because they only see it as, okay, we are tourist city, but there's plenty of people who live there. There are executives, big executives that run California companies, all of that Silicon Valley. They are living in Las Vegas and living large. And yeah, I just maybe want to be one of those members, part of a community where that's where I come to work, and I know I can smoke where I work and I can consume where I work, and my cannabis is kept in a way that is going to make sure that it's always going to be fresh and in good and good usage. So I don't know. I got a lot of visions for what consumption looks like.
Don't say it all on the screen, honey. The game is sold, ain't told.
Oh, God. Listen, I'll give somebody my playbook. Ain't nobody gonna cross over like I do, okay?
We know, but have your little sister who wants the playbook and not gonna cross nothing over. We ain't giving y'all the game all the way. Now, y'all might have to subscribe to some links and things to get that hello. But with that being said, it's quite interesting how they have written the policy on the licensing aspect of the cannabis consumption lounges. So for the already cannabis retail license lounge, they are acceptable to get a license for on-site consumption. However, if it is multiple dispensaries, you are only allowed one cannabis consumption lounge license.
So your whole chain can't have a little add-on.
No, so the whole chain cannot have an add-on. And then for the independent consumption lounges, they have capped those at 20 licenses that would be allowed to give out. And let's go back. There are no hard caps on dispensary on-site consumption licenses. So even though, you have 3 different licenses and they all can't have them, if you got 20 different retailers that are all different, 30 of those dispensaries will be able to have their own on-site consumption.
Well, what it sounds like to me is they prefer people to be doing the retail plus, and a little bit hesitant about the independent part. And again, this is part of this idea that we have to continue to control every aspect of usage and access. And oh my gosh. I mean, I struggle with it because it's like the consumption lounges also are the only places that if you are in public housing or in a place where you're not allowed to consume because your landlord is not interested in that, they can kick you out by law. If you do that, then these are the places that are really for those folks. And only 20 of them for a whole state sounds crazy. And of course, of the 20 of them, how many of them are going to have be, from an experience perspective, all about, I want to have a speakeasy, which is great. Shout out to Josephina Billy's or Happy Monkey. Like, I like that, but sometimes I just want to go somewhere where I'm working and I can consume. So what's that look like? And will that be in enough licenses to have that diversity? The answer to that is no. Why put a cap? It doesn't make sense. When there's a cap, we already know that equity is not going to be in play. When there's a cap, we already know that it can be bought. There's going to be a false competition on these consumptions at lounges, and it's going to be around real estate too, right? I feel like that's going to be a big part of it. So I'm not loving the cap. I also think it means that they want more people to go and do the retail. So if you already have a retail license, and again, this isn't an incredibly diverse market at all, you're going to be able to quickly expand. But I will say, if I had a chain of 20 dispensaries and I can only pick one, it kind of reminds me of growing up in the hood where you're trying to find the one McDonald's that have the playground.
Yeah.
It's like
the one McDonald's that have the playground. Yeah, been there.
Yeah. They're like, oh, this one don't got the playground, and you like got a U-turn out because you try to have an experience for your kids and eat. And it's not in the hood. They didn't build all of the McDonald's with playgrounds. Maybe it wasn't a value add. Maybe they didn't have enough licenses. I doubt that. But my point is, that's what you're doing.
That was shade, you guys, if you missed it. But yes, I like that analogy, and we might have to start putting these analogies down for some of these lawmakers, because sometimes 2 and 2 don't equal 4 for them.
No, it's usually 2. Like, wait, are we adding, subtracting, or are we not doing nothing at all?
That's supposed to be a 0. But okay, so there are some bills that are being talked about that are not being talked about with the overhaul of bills happening and being signed by the governor in Nevada. And this one, I really like this, and you would love this one. Basically allows for manufacturers and food establishments to produce and sell foods and beverages that contain hemp products. Okay, and that takes place in January 1st of 2022.
That's a big one. And I think Julio mentioned it. What about having these spaces that are in like the casinos but are within federal limits? That is where hemp comes into play. I mean, again, it's man-made, but at least that is something that allows us to still participate and get folks smoking something better than cigarettes. Anybody's hemp is still going to be better. And so, yeah, I absolutely do see that as a crossover. And what this is allowing is for those same establishments to have hemp infused beverages. And that to me is a game changer, because now we're offering something a little bit healthier and probably a little sexier. We're dipping our toe into cannabis space for a federally like regulated license, if you will.
Yeah, and I think it tells kind of like F you to the FDA, right? Like there's a part of it where we know the FDA is wrong. No hemp in food, no hemp in beauty, no hemp in there's all these no hemp in things in it, but y'all created a hemp farm bill but won't let us do anything with it.
Well, see, that's where we also got to understand the government, because FDA did not create the farm bill. The legislation did. The president passed it, and the FDA hasn't done anything. And that is why there is a Hemp Access and Consumer Protection Act that has been released this year, introduced by Senator Wyden. That bill is important because it's compelling the FDA to do what it's not been doing, which is make cannabinoids from hemp exempt from this idea of it being a drug, and just regulate it like a dietary supplement, in which case it wouldn't be where we are, which is a gray. Because to your point, they have bark, but they kind of done this like light bark, right? Because it's not guidelines, it's guidance. When anything is guidance, it's like, well, I would advise you to do it, but technically it ain't against the law to do it. And so we have people saying, okay, we ain't gonna take that advice. And that's what Nevada just said. We ain't taking that advice.
Well, I wouldn't take that advice either, because I'm tired of compelling people we pay our tax money bills with, right, to do their MFing job. Okay, so I think that's what I'm ready to be like, thank you, no thanks to your advice.
Well, listen, I think it's important for us to also demonstrate, you know me, government official, I recognize that government has blinders. One of the biggest things it will not do is take risks. And if someone's been doing it for hundreds of years, which is what our disadvantage is as people of color, as women, and any disabled folks, the individuals who have not gotten equity all this time, where the precedent is against us. So we have to show through pilots, which is small like demonstrations of how it's done. And when you do it from a government perspective, like some of the things we're doing in the city of Portland, it makes it easier for another government to be like, you know what, we could do that. Otherwise it's always, we've never done it. And so we don't get over that hurdle.
Well, we're going to have to agree to disagree. The two ends of the millennial spectrum is definitely coming out on that one about the government taking risks or not. And we're going to keep it there and move on to the last little part of a cannabis bill that the Nevada governor signed, which allows for curbside pickup and changing labeling requirements. And that is already signed into law automatically. Once signed, it is the law. So that's pretty cool, because we know with contactless delivery, that's a big thing. People do not want to get out their car to go do it. Nobody, I know I do not want to stand in no long lines or drive lines either to get a lot of my things. So to see them willing to actively make that change because of something like COVID-19 is pretty dope. Because when we were out there, the only cannabis store that had a drive-through was Nuwu, and that is on a Native American land.
Yes, so they were following their own rules and using that sovereignty. But what I will say is this is another example of us trying to undo laws that we put in place based on fear. Because why, of course, would we not be able to have a drive-through or a pickup? Because, of course, people who are you're going to pick up cannabis, that means you must go and be smoking it right then, and you must go and be doing it under
and
the
we
DUI.
Need to see your face.
And we got to have everything. You got to come inside. It's like this is that over regulation, almost strangulation of the market. And so I'm excited to see Nevada let some of that go, because they're going to see their market do a lot better than it has been in the past.
Hell yeah. And I want to give a special shout out to Cannabis Equity and Inclusion Community, CEIC, because when we were in Nevada, they were already on the ground doing some things, making some changes, and now we see all the changes that they made. I remember when I went to the first meeting, they got a big old whiteboard of like, what do we need to fix in this Nevada cannabis industry? And child, they put they pen to paper and they boots on the ground and they fixing it. So shout out to them, follow them, what they're doing, what they're using to talk to their lawmakers. Use that. Because again, even though I don't necessarily agree with a lot of government things, if you are seeing something come into place, you can use it somewhere else in a different state.
You absolutely can. And I know we have the URL, so I want to drop that in the comments, but I definitely feel like you also have to recognize that the government is broken. So you're working with a broken thing that you're attempting to optimize and fix. And so what is the difference between being an older millennial or an exennial versus a younger millennial or a zillennial is that I recognize that this all the pieces I'm working with, well, we gonna make it work until we add or subtract or we create. And I right now feel like the way we make it work is through people like Aisha Goins, who is a trained lobbyist. She understands what is the hindrance. And a lot of the hindrances, while they pass all these bills, they also pass 100 others, like you said. And the odds of that legislator really knowing every single detail or being able to come to work the next day, all of them having their own political strategists coming together and writing the bill that's right is low. And that comes from the advocacy community. So we provide the language in these laws ultimately more often than not. And that is why CRCC is so important, because we're helping to provide the insights and the precedent across the country, to your point, because we united in this effort. And this is one of those places where I'm going to be like, did y'all see what Nevada did?
Right. So if y'all ain't see what Nevada did, the way to see it is through Cannabis Equity and Inclusion Community, because they'll tell you step by step. And so we definitely going to drop that link in the comments for you guys, because they're doing some major things, and I know I'm about to be like, oh, well, let's take some of this back and go back here and fix this over there, because it be looking cray for show. And Nevada, I mean, how many bills was that? What, 5?
At least Nevada definitely showed up and showed out in this session, and so it's impressive. And like I said, I'm just happy that the bills that did get passed were respectable and supported by the advocates that we mentioned that have been doing the work all of these years. It isn't overnight. I mean, remember top bud tender Andrew? Yes, in 2017 he was testifying for cannabis consumption. And so now we just got it passed, and just recognize how many times that folks had to come back to the table and give testimony to show that, respectable folks actually want this license and how it could be a helpful thing for Nevada as a state. So I'm kudos to them. It's a little bit more than a golf clap. This is I would say they get the most improved award. They're not the MVP. That's New York now, but they get the most improved award for this session for sure.
Okay. All right.
I mean, really,
there's still 11 states. 14 states now of cannabis legalization.
At least 18 at this point.
18?
Yes.
Adult use?
Adult use. So we are there.
We're running out of accountabilities.
You're right.
We got to
Yes, at least 18. But no, here's the other thing is season 3, if you haven't binged us, you want to go back. Season 3, I kid you not, Ice, every week we had something crazy going on in Nevada. It made me stop shopping the market. Remember, I was like, I don't want the flower. Why? Because we get it, testing is wrong. People got to get this stuff pulled from the
but it's
shelf.
Already sold out, so
it's
you can't technically pull it from the
How
shelf.
are you pulling it from the shelf if it's already sold out? So are you going to people's houses and getting it? You're
Don't
not.
come knock on this door.
No. So yeah, I'm happy to see that they're turning around. They also, we didn't actually talk about this, but Aisha and Kima are part of a small government selected or governor selected a diversity committee that has been advising on some of these laws. So I think Nevada is figuring it out, and slowly but surely we'll see them rise from the ashes like a phoenix, maybe.
Well, they right next to Arizona, Phoenix. So Arizona, you might want to take note because we know what y'all nightlife look like. But I really enjoyed this episode because we got to highlight some really great things about cannabis. It always feels good to talk about good tea.
Yes, of course, and not be so angry about how crazy things are happening in this industry. But I appreciate this weekly ability to just sound off, because sometimes in my role, I don't always get to say exactly what I want to say. And I know folks are like, for real? I usually do. I would say 90% of the time, and the other 10% is on my shirt.
Well, that's the real tea, y'all. Yes. And on our shirt, we all about the WeedHead. So as we bring in all these great bills, we have helped participate in a lot of these markets. We've worked in every adult use market, every medical market. So we're really excited when we see these things come into play, especially cannabis reform in a good way, because we've seen some cannabis reform that have taken some steps back, child.
Yes. That being said, we'll probably have that tea next week.
Oh Lord, goodness. Well, thank you so much. And like Dasheeda said, make sure you binge us anytime on SoundCloud, Spotify, Audible, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, YouTube. Season 3. We went in on Nevada. You can compare it to this episode and see what are some of the great things that have happened. And make sure you follow She Blaze on IG, she_Blaze. And tell them where they can find you and close this out.
Oh, of course. You can find me at Dasheeda Dawson on IG and Twitter, or the WeedHead, theweedhead.com. You can find me and my company, my sisters. Shout out to TCC Media. Shout out to Imani. Shout out to my award-winning executive producer here, Ice. I'm so excited. Season 5. Oh my God, we're on season 5. Yes.
And
wow.
And hot girl summer. I was about to say that, but that might not be appropriate right there.
I don't know.
No. Okay.
It's gonna be a mass girl summer. So
all right, you guys. On that note, have a great week, and we will see y'all next week.
Bye.